So, for decades, we've been trying to build computers that think like brains, right? But what if we flipped that on its head? What if we started using actual brains as computers? A really powerful and kind of surprising feedback loop is forming between artificial intelligence and biology, and it has the potential to redefine, well, everything. Let's dive in. Okay, to really get how deep this connection goes, we have to start with this truly wild experiment that just completely blurs the line between a living thing and, a piece of code. Yeah, you know this one. It's Pong, a classic game from the 70s. Simple paddle, bouncing ball, super easy for a person to learn, and these days, honestly, a piece of cake for an AI to master too. But recently, researchers threw a new challenger into the ring. And this player, it isn't programmed with ones and zeros. It's not holding a controller. That's right. Scientists in a lab literally taught a tiny cluster of 800,000 living neurons, about the size of a bumblebee's brain, how to play Pong. By sending electrical pulses to show where the ball was, the neurons actually learned to send signals back to move the paddle. Wild. This incredible kind of sci-fi feat actually has a name: biocomputing. It's this whole new frontier where we're using living tissue, sometimes people call it wetware, to process information. We're talking about a whole new kind of computer here. So you might be asking, why on earth would we do this? I mean, building computers out of living cells sounds complicated. Well, it's because the technology that's powered our world for the last 50 years, it's hitting a wall, a fundamental wall. You've probably heard of Moore's Law. For decades, it was the engine of progress. We just kept making transistors smaller, packing more and more of them onto silicon chips. But we're at the end of that road. Today, some layers on these chips are literally one single atom thick. You just can't get any smaller than that. We've hit a physical limit. And honestly, there's another, maybe even bigger problem: energy. The demand for AI is just insatiable. By 2034, data centers are projected to be eating up over 1,500 terawatt hours of energy every single year. To put that in perspective for you, that's about the same amount of energy that the entire country of India uses in a year. Just wow. Now, this is where it gets really crazy. Look at this efficiency gap. A supercomputer might use 40 megawatts of power. That's enough for thousands of homes. The human brain, with its 86 billion neurons, runs on just 20 watts. 20. That's the difference between powering a city block and powering a single little LED light bulb. It turns out, nature is the ultimate low-power computer. Okay, so biology might be the future of computing, but here's where things get really interesting, where the loop closes on itself. Our current AI, even with its massive energy appetite, is already unlocking the secrets of biology in ways we never, ever could have imagined. For half a century, one of the biggest, most stubborn questions in biology was the protein folding problem. See, proteins start as this long string of amino acids, but to do anything, they have to fold into a very specific, incredibly complex 3D shape. And the question was, how can we possibly predict that final shape just from the initial sequence? And this wasn't just some academic puzzle. I mean, proteins are the tiny machines that run our bodies. When they fold wrong, you get these devastating diseases like Alzheimer's or Parkinson's. So the key takeaway here is, if you can predict the shape, you can start to design drugs to fix the problems. For decades, figuring out a single protein structure was a massive job. You had to grow these tiny crystals, shoot them with X-rays, and then solve what was basically an impossible 3D jigsaw puzzle. It could take a PhD student years and cost over $100,000 for just one single protein. So progress was slow, it was painful, it was expensive. And then AI entered the picture. And in what I can only describe as a stunning turn of events, it basically solved the riddle. There's this competition called CASP that was kind of the battlefield for this problem. Back in '94, the first results were so bad people literally laughed. Then for years, progress was just tiny little steps. Then in 2018, DeepMind's AlphaFold showed some real promise. But in 2020, AlphaFold 2 didn't just win, it got scores so high that most of the scientific community just said, okay, the problem is solved. It was a total shock. The new way is just a world apart. Forget crystals and x-rays. You just feed the AI the amino acid sequence. It combs through these huge databases for evolutionary clues and uses a super powerful network to spit out a 3D model. Not in years, in seconds. The scale of this breakthrough is honestly hard to wrap your head around. By the middle of 2022, DeepMind hadn't just predicted one protein, or 1,000. They had predicted the structures were 218 million proteins. That is pretty much every single one known to science. They solved a lifetime of work for an entire field, and then they just gave it away for free. And this brings us right back to where we started. We have an AI which was inspired by the brain's structure that can now decode the fundamental machinery of life itself. The loop is officially closing. This is the core idea, the feedback loop. We build an AI based on what we know about the brain. That AI then helps us understand biology on a level we never could before, and that deeper understanding of biology is now teaching us how to build the next generation of computers, these biocomputers. And look, the stakes here could not be higher. With the world's population getting older, the burden of brain disorders is just immense, and it's growing. These new tools, both AI and biocomputing, they offer real hope for understanding and maybe even treating diseases that we thought were impossible to tackle. And the impact goes way beyond just medicine. Using AI to design brand new proteins from scratch could revolutionize, well, everything. We could create proteins that capture carbon from the air, or ones that degrade plastic, or form the basis of totally new materials and technologies. But as we start to merge biology and computation, we're walking into some really profound and, frankly, unsettling new territory. Researchers are already asking the big questions. If you build a complex enough network of brain cells in a dish, could it actually become self-aware? And, that leads to an even tougher question. If these biological computers do achieve some kind of consciousness, what are our responsibilities to them? Can you just turn them off? Can you kill them? The ethical lines here are getting incredibly blurry really fast. So think about it. We started out building computers that mimic the brain. Now, we're building brains that act as computers. This convergence, this feedback loop between AI and biology, it isn't just a scientific breakthrough. It's a philosophical one. And it forces us to ask a really big question. What happens when we can no longer tell the difference?
Let's talk about it. All right, now I know biological computer sounds pretty wild. We're talking about a computer made partly out of living human brain cells, actual living neurons, plus silicon hardware, working together to form what they're calling synthetic biological intelligence. This new form of AI, or SBI for short, is not just some sci-fi concept. It's real, and it's been officially launched. Cortical Labs revealed the CL1 at an event in Barcelona on March 2nd, 2025, and they say it's going to revolutionize everything from drug discovery to disease modeling to how we might build future robotics and automation systems. So how does it work exactly? The idea is that these neurons, which are grown in the lab from induced pluripotent stem cells, or iPSCs, can be placed on something like a silicon chip that has electrodes laid out in a grid. In the CL1 setup, there are 59 electrodes forming a sort of playground for these neurons to grow and form connections. Cortical Labs calls it a body in a box. It has its own life support system so the cells can thrive, filtration, pumps, temperature control, gas mixing, basically an entire environment to keep the neurons healthy. This is then connected to software that reads and writes signals to the neurons in real time. Because these brain cells thrive on predictable signals, they're basically searching for energy-efficient ways to respond, the system can reward them for doing something right and punish them for doing something wrong. Cortical's earlier research, published in the journal Neuron, showed that with the right stimulus, these cultured neurons learned how to play the classic arcade game Pong. The researchers would send electrical signals to tell the cells where the paddle was, and the cells would respond. If the virtual ball was missed, a random chaotic signal was sent back which the cells didn't like. If they hit the ball, the signal was more predictable, so over time the neurons got better at Pong. That first version was called Dish Brain, and it made headlines because it was basically the beginning of this idea that you could have a self-learning living network on a chip. Dish Brain was neat, but the new CL1 is way beyond that. Cortical Labs has reworked the technology to be more stable, more energy efficient, and easier to program.